Last time that weren't. Okay, good.
It's so good to
Right.
be taking it easy. Why would I ever leave?
Hey.
You need me to go pick up a Red Bull? Quickly.
I need
Super
it.
fast.
Sure, go super fast. Go. Go.
Talking to the mirror in their underwear. I got some good friends that live down the street. Got a good-looking woman with her arms around me. Here in a small town where it feels like home. I got everything I need and nothing that I was calling your vibe on the radio station on a 4-day, 3-night beach vacation. Deep sea senorita fishing down at Panama. Oh Lord, when it rains,
Hi, welcome everybody. If you're coming in live, make sure you leave us a comment right here. Say, what's up? FONZI came back with our soon-to-be sponsor. Let's go. All right. FONZI, you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's make it happen.
I'm exhausted.
You're exhausted. Let's go. Welcome everybody to Content is Profit Wednesday edition. Today, a very special occasion.
Dude, I'm so pumped up for today.
I know.
And I'm very tired right now.
That was a good sprint.
Bro,
Yeah.
Sprinting.
Red
in
Bull, I
socks?
think we deserve to be sponsored. Just gonna put that out there.
Sprinting in socks is very difficult, let me tell you. And right after eating a whole bunch of sushi, not a good idea.
Oh boy. Okay. Do you have the barf bucket over there?
It was $5 sushi at Publix. You know how it is. You gotta
Oh,
go
boy.
take advantage of
You
that.
didn't tell me?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's right.
You good. Yeah, for those listening around the world, Publix, best store ever. Just saying. Okay. Content time. You ready, Fonz?
I'm ready to go.
Are we all shared? Are we good to go?
Well,
Here,
did you share my
for our
screen?
listeners? Oh, that was good. Okay.
That was smooth.
We're gonna need this for this conversation because a bunch of golden boulders are about to drop. I got my hat. I got my mustache. Last day of the mustache for those
Whoa.
following the thing.
I think you lack the upkeeping of the mustache.
No,
It
this
kind of
is-
looks
this
like
is
your
perfect.
beard's already coming out.
This is perfect. Anyways,
All right,
lost a
we'll
bit
see.
mustache. If you want to see a picture, go to my social media. Anyways, welcome everybody coming in live. All right, I think we're good.
I'm ready to go.
Today, I feel like my radio voice is hyped.
Yeah,
My radio voice was
Maybe
on
the
point.
Red Bull was a bad idea.
All right, here we go.
We've got
Hey, I'm Luis.
And this is Luis.
And welcome to the Content is Profit podcast.
In here, you're going to get the insights, accountability, and drive to create consistently and increase revenue.
You'll hear from top entrepreneurs, creators, and anything and everything you need to know about content. All this while having a good time.
The goal of this podcast is simple: to entertain, educate, and turn your content into profit.
The goal is to entertain.
Entertain.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all know,
that's the hardest
faithful
word for
listeners,
FONZI.
the faithful listeners, they already know that's a tough word for me. So
It's
it's
all
all
good.
good. You gotta embrace it.
Hey, I am so stoked today. FONZI, what are we talking about?
Today we're talking all about newsletters, how to start them, grow them, monetize them. We're gonna dive deep, and I'm not gonna say the same joke as I said on last episode, but I am extremely pumped up because
Yeah.
I feel since we dove into the online entrepreneurial world, we've been exposed in a way to newsletters. And recently, in the last couple of years, we've noticed that they've started to picking up quite intensely. And today we got the guy that has been literally diving deep into all this and
Like-
analyzing them and creating content around them. So
Like legit millions of
stuff.
dollars.
yeah, like
Uh,
8-figure newsletter.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yes. This is time. This is time
Yes.
to announce that you need to follow our social media channels and the podcast in your favorite podcasting platform at BIZBROS and Content is Profit. Go check us out.
That is right. And if today's guests help you move yourself a little closer to your goal or grow your newsletter, please don't forget to share this episode and share it with your best friends and leave a 5-star review.
That's
I
right.
said share this episode and share it with your best friends. You gotta share it twice.
All the best friends.
With best friends and with not best
All the
friends.
best friends. All right, so today we are back with another guest. Yes, we know it has been a while since we had a guest, but that is because we're only going to bring the best of the best, the creme de la creme.
Bro, I appreciate the accent. I wasn't gonna tell anything to see if you're gonna get it right or
Bro,
not.
I'm a
Good
pro.
job,
You're talking
good
to a
job.
pro. You're talking to a pro here.
That's right, guys. Today's guest is someone that has dedicated the last years of his life to newsletters. He has been talking to experts across the industry, getting answers about the business models, financial numbers, growth strategies, pricing, and more.
Not to mention that he just completed a brilliant piece on how to $10 million newsletters actually work. And he wants to share those insights with you.
Can't wait. Please welcome the one and only, newly crowned by the BIZBROS, king of newsletters, Ethan Bruce.
What's going on, guys?
What's up, Ethan?
That was amazing, man. I'm sitting behind the scenes watching this intro, asking myself, how in the world am I ever going to live up to half of this? But thank you very much.
But with all the golden boulders you're about to drop on here, you said earlier, you're like, oh, your studio is amazing. But yeah, it's going to be destroyed after all those boulders like land on here, man. Thank you so much. We're so excited. When we received that message that you want to talk about newsletters with us, we're like, yes.
Absolutely, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Ethan, I just regret one thing. I'm regretting one thing right now. And it is the fact that we didn't ship you a crown before this episode. So right when we say, you're like, what is this crown for? And then when we finish the intro, you just put it on and walk in like, yes, I am the king of newsletters.
I've got one in the other room. Should I just go grab it? You want me to come back?
If you want to, it's gonna make for good content.
Yeah, I'll put my Wednesday crown on because I've actually got a whole collection of.
Ethan, super stoked, obviously. So for those that might not be familiar with you, can you share a little bit like the 2-minute version of like who Ethan is, like who you work for, what projects are you involved in, and I think that's gonna give us a good starting line on to tackle this topic.
Yeah, sure. So I am a writer. Most of my job is writing about businesses and entrepreneurship. I write for a newsletter called Trends, which is the paid newsletter. You guys called this out last week, so appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's the paid newsletter, belongs to a company called The Hustle, which is another huge newsletter business. We write about business and entrepreneurship. Specifically, my team writes about emerging opportunities where people are spending more money, how you can build certain businesses in like exciting niches that you maybe haven't heard about. And that's what I spend most of my time doing. And then a couple of years ago, as a company, we sort of noticed that, like you said, newsletters are becoming more and more popular. More people kind of want to understand how this industry works. It's something that we knew a fair amount about. Hustle's been around for 7 years now.
Yeah.
And so we decided to go out and write the comprehensive guide to the industry. And so ever since then, I've been interviewing not only people on our team, sort of like deconstructing how our company works, but also, just like super early operators everywhere from Morning Brew to like BuzzFeed, AppSumo, all these different newsletters you've heard of, really just trying to break down how the industry works. So I think in a nutshell, that's about it. I'm a newsletter writer, deep in this space, and have like a minor obsession with how newsletter businesses actually work.
It's like your head about to explode with all the knowledge that you have from like, the years of experience and all these things. Like, is that why you guys urge to share all the secrets?
Yeah, it's that and the weight of the crown. So those two things head about to explode. Now it's what it really is it's it's a blast. So we're about to put out this big publication. Can I tell you the real story behind how this started? So you guys mentioned on your show the other week, HubSpot bought The Hustle a little over a year ago. But before that, we were operating as like a completely independent business. And so we had to make all of our money through the newsletter. So we had this one daily email that went out. And we made a bunch of money through that. That was making like several $1 million a year in ad revenue. And then we had the paid product, which was Trends, which is another several $1 million a year. And, it costs money to run these businesses. So we had to kind of figure out what the next thing was going to be that we were going to build. And when I say that we decided to write the guide to the newsletter industry, we originally launched that as a paid product. It was going to be like $2,500. That would be our first really expensive paid product. And so we put hundreds of hours into interviewing for this, writing custom illustrations. We built an entire custom web reader around the entire thing. There was going to be a whole social experience behind it. And then literally a week or two before it launches, we get the notice that HubSpot's acquiring us. And HubSpot is like a multi-billion-dollar company. So they were really excited about certain parts of what we had built, but they didn't necessarily need, the couple $100,000 that we had sold of this product. So it kind of got put on a shelf. And now we're going to be giving it away for free. So we've literally written this entire guide that really designed to be like sold as like a really expensive thing. And at this point, we were just tired of looking at it on the shelf. So we're like, we need to get this out the door. And how can we do that? We're going to do it for free. So the reason I love doing this is because when you really dig into this space, you see people like you guys and all kinds of other creators who are using newsletters to like tell their story and build the business that they want. Yeah. That's what I like being part of. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, that is so cool. And I definitely see the value on all that work, and I'm 100% certain that a lot of people would pay. But the fact that you guys are giving it away for free, I think it's incredible. I'm curious though. Do you think giving it away? I believe a lot in charging for stuff just because it's that commitment, and probably people that are more willing to take action once they get their hands on it. But at the same time, I see the value of like, okay, it's free, and then you reach more people. These people are talking about newsletters, maybe directing traffic to you guys. Is there a sort of play strategy behind that you guys are, decided on why to give it away for free?
Yeah, great questions. This is something I wonder about myself. Like, is the perceived value still there if it's free? And here's our goal. And I don't want to overhype the guide here. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to dig in and actually like give away. I want to give away the best parts of it today on this show. But when the actual guide comes out, the goal is for it to be like so overwhelmingly valuable that it just becomes the thing people talk about when they talk about this industry. Like sort of the way people talk about like Netflix's, employee deck or something like that. There's certain pieces of this entrepreneurship equation, like certain documents or books that have kind of taken on a cult following of their own because they're so useful. And I think our goal is for this to be that, even if it's not for sale, we want people to like just really dig in and use it. So we'll see. I mean, it remains to be seen, but people listening to this can be kind of people. At the end of the day, the people are the judge. So I've got to pass.
It's going to be a good play on positioning. Definitely position you guys as the go-to knowledge broker for newsletters. And then everybody having a question is just gonna go to you guys.
Yeah. I've been going through your Twitter thread, which by the way, we're gonna link it right below, and it's so good. And there's so many questions there. But before we go into like the nitty gritty and the meat on the really juicy stuff, I'm very interested, right? Like we talk a lot about content teams and fractional teams, right? We provide a type of fractional team for video content. Right. So I'm very interested in those initial days of you guys, right? Because we might have some listeners that either they're building their own teams internally, right? They're trying to figure out their content framework. They're trying to monetize that content, right? For us, it's known that our show is our platform, right? Whether that's an audience side of things that come to us, or whether that's the guests that we connect with and develop that relationship, right? That's the way that we monetize this type of content. But I'm very interested initially when you guys started, the newsletters. How was that process of starting it from zero? What was the decision where like, okay, we need to monetize this? How many ways? Like, if you can give us a quick background on that, like, and then we can dive into the goal of the guide.
Totally. Yeah. Great question. So interestingly enough, The Hustle actually started as an event company. It was founded by Sam Parr, who's, pretty big force to be reckoned with on Twitter and elsewhere. Yes. And at the time he wasn't really known. He didn't have much of an audience at all. He just kind of been in entrepreneurial circles. And so he, was living in San Francisco, and he wanted to build up his network and also build a business. And so the idea for The Hustle was sort of the merger of those two things. The business side was like selling tickets to this event where he was going to get a whole bunch of entrepreneurs to come and talk about entrepreneurship. And then obviously, as for the person who was organizing that entire thing, it helps to build his network as well. So The Hustle actually ran as an event business for the first 1 or 2 years that it was around. There wasn't really a newsletter there. And this, this, like I said, it was 6 or 7 years ago. So this was really before newsletters had come on the scene and been like a popular business model. A lot of people weren't doing it. And so they ran this event company. The event company was quite profitable. And then at some point, I actually don't know exactly why he pivoted, but I think it was probably something to do with diversifying income, because, after you host several events, you have all these email addresses,
Yeah.
and there's an opportunity there to continue to build the audience, continue to build not only a pipeline for the events, but also to potentially monetize that email offering. And so at some point, they started creating some more and more regular content schedule, and the hustle morphed into like a primarily newsletter driven company. And yeah, you see this a lot, actually. It's interesting. Companies like Morning Brew also kind of started with that goal in mind. They didn't necessarily start with the idea of monetizing out of the gate. And it was several years into building that company that they actually, raised money, hired writers instead of using volunteers, and actually decided to make a go of it as a business.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of these companies that you hear people talk about these days, they started somewhere else and pivoted into newsletters. And then interestingly, like they figured out how to make the industry work. And now more and more people are seeing, oh, this is a totally viable business. And that's why you're seeing kind of the rush in.
Interesting. I'm curious, do you see that transition from event-based business to the newsletter based business? You said they already had this database, right? There's a bunch of emails and then they transition. Was that an advantage at the time of starting? Because obviously there's a lot of people that are going to start from scratch, from zero, right? Zero people. And probably the person that starts it is going to be the researcher, is going to be the writer. Or like you said, they might have some people that, want to give their time to write on the newsletter, which I'm very curious on learning how you guys go about doing that. I think it's a pretty good probably starting strategy for those that are looking, to build a newsletter. But I'm curious, was that an advantage having that number? And do you remember what was the amount of, potential emails at the beginning that you guys had to kickstart that newsletter?
Great question. Yeah. I'm going to say it yes and no in terms of whether or not it's an advantage. So when you start a newsletter business, if you already have pre-existing emails, that'll always be some kind of an advantage. But the reality is, and we can talk about this more as we get into growth, I think the reason that the hustle ended up being successful as a newsletter business is actually because Sam and his early team were quite good at getting attention. And so it wasn't necessarily about the first emails that they had on the list. It was that they were able to actually continue growing that list at a pretty rapid clip. And like I said, we can get into this deeper when we start talking more and more about growth. But for them early on, the biggest thing that they leaned on was viral content. And so they would, this is what like Sam calls showmanship. They would select articles specifically because they knew they were going to be controversial or that they would have like a high likelihood of traveling around the web. They did a really, really good job of that early on, and that kind of established them in the space. I think one other thing that was like an early advantage for them, and I didn't join the team until 2020, so somewhere between like 3 and 5 years into the game for them. But when I look back at what they did really well early on, it was that ability to like create content that people talk about, and I don't know. I'll think about some other things as we go through it, but there's a couple other things that they did really well. We can chat about as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember. I don't know if this was actually the Hustle or the Morning Brew, but I remember signing up to one of those, and they had at the bottom of every email kind of like a progress bar on how many people you refer, and then you would qualify for surprises. I remember one time they were like giving away like a MacBooks Pro and stuff like that. I was like, heck yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna send it to all my friends, right? Yep. So I'm guessing again, we can dive into those strategies when we get to the growth side of things.
Yeah. Ethan, my last question here, right? Like it's on the team side, and then that decision on monetizing, right? Like how did you guys make money initially, right? Because I think that's like the first hurdle that a lot of people are trying to figure out. Is it okay? You hear all these statements like, you can make $1 off of each subscriber that you have in your list, for example. That's like one of the standards. And then people are like, oh, sweet. Okay, well, what do I do? Do I sell them things? Do they go to my website and do that? Do I sell sponsorships? Like, what is it, right? And people starting up, the trend that we've seen is, especially with podcasting, they tend to go to the sponsorship side and then they go into the audience loop. And initially that can be very challenging, right? We have to do a bunch of stuff to get there. So what was that? How do you guys started the monetization aspect of the hustle? And then, how has that evolved?
That's a perfect question. And I'll get into it. We'll go super deep on it in just a second, but you reminded me of two other things that I think just relate to the last question in terms of like, was that list an advantage to them? So I'll say, and I think these are really important. So the list was an advantage, or sorry, having the event company was an advantage in that it created cash flow that allowed the email business to get going. Right. And I think this is one thing that a lot of creators overlook. We talk about this on my podcast all the time, where there's sort of like, there are 3 steps to making the business work as a creator. First, you need cash flow. That's absolutely number 1. So we always tell people, we're like, don't quit your job. If you want to go and start building a media company, do it on the side at first, or you have to find some way to keep the cash coming, because it takes time to build the trust that like an audience needs to really monetize it well. After you have some kind of cash flow, whether that's through a job or a service company that you run or something that's, easy to cash flow, then you start building your audience, and then eventually it's products on the back side of that you monetize. So for the hustle, having that event company early on definitely offered cash flow, which was definitely an advantage when it comes to building a media company. But it's not necessarily the only way to start. I mean, Morning Brew raised money from investors, when they decided to kind of make a full-time go of it. So there's other ways to get that early cash flow. The other thing that I think was an advantage to them too, and I alluded to this and then I halfway forgot it while we were talking, is they picked like a topic and voice that wasn't really well represented in the market. So if you look at what the hustle does today, it's kind of common to see, business newsletters that are sort of like, they use memes and GIFs, and they're kind of like your best friend. That was very rare back then. Back then it was like Forbes, Business Insider, like all these kind of stodgy magazines. And so Sam started out early on. He said, we are going to be like your best friend that just texts you what the news is. And I think people who are looking to get into this, one of the most important things you can do early on is take a look at whatever your area of expertise is or your sphere of influence, and just ask yourself, like, what do I wish was here? What's missing? Because if you're not going to out Morning Brew, you're not going to out Milk Road. So crypto news, business news, finance news, there's still plenty of opportunity there, but you can't beat these mega players at their own game. You got to bring a different game to the table. And so we can get into that as well. But you asked a more specific question, which is about how do you actually monetize early on? And this is actually the right question to start with, because a lot of people will ask about not just the hustle, but like all kinds of newsletters. They'll say something like, well, how big does your audience have to be? Or like, what kind of technology do I need? How can I grow faster? Those kinds of questions. Here's what I've found in 2 years of talking to players at some of the most successful media companies in the world. The size of your audience matters less than knowing how to monetize these businesses. If you know how to monetize these businesses, you know how the business model works, you can make lots of money on a small audience. And I know you guys talked about this last week, but I know somebody who does 6 figures on a newsletter with 1,000 subscribers. I know somebody who does $5 million or $2 million on a newsletter with 5,000 subscribers. I know people who do $10 to $20 million, and like a team of 3 people run that newsletter. And it's in a niche you'd probably never think of, which is farming. Like they write about soybean futures and corn.
What?
Yeah, it's nuts. Awesome. So the topic doesn't matter as much. The size of your audience doesn't matter as much as knowing how to monetize. Those things still matter, but really knowing the business model is the most important part.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about how they monetize, well, let me go a little bit more broad. The hustle specifically sold ads early on, right? And that was easy for them to do because they had grown a pretty large audience. And we can get into the specifics of how they did that in a second. But at the high level, there's basically 3 ways to monetize a newsletter company. You have free products, which are monetized via ads or affiliate deals. You have low price subscriptions, and you have high price subscriptions. And the low price subscriptions are typically called front end products, and the high price subscriptions are called back end products. And so the way these businesses really work when you break them down is you have your free audience, which is always going to be your biggest audience, lowest barrier to entry. Free audience, you can monetize that on ads and affiliate deals, and then you use it to sell memberships to your front end products, and then your front end sells memberships to your back end products. And the reality is you can mix and match those a lot. So some companies only have one, some have all three. But when you know how the business model works, it takes a lot of the mystery out of it, and you have like a much better chance of being successful at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan, I just want to backtrack here a little bit. I think you just share about what would be the perfect ad for your newsletter guide. You gotta put a print in there that just says size doesn't matter, and then very small at the bottom, when building your newsletter, whatever, just something like that. I think it will call people attention. Just random thought,
That's perfect. Yeah, it's all about how you use it.
There
you
go.
Yep. That's the voice. That's the voice of Content Profit Newsletter. FONZI, come on.
And sorry. Just on that backtrack, I do wanna just reminded me. You mentioned something that I consider what we call here a golden boulder. A lot of people talk about, the topics, niching down, all these things, but you mentioned the voice. And that is so key. I think people don't really understand how valuable it is to have a voice that relates to other people. And we talk about the 3 P's of differentiation in here. We've mentioned a few times, product, processes, and personality. And personality, it is that voice that you're talking about, right? Infusing a personality into a newsletter that makes it exciting to read. I get drawn personally to the hustle type of newsletters, newsletters that are not very formal, if you want to put it that way, right? I mean, I have the Milk Road too. It's like 90% jokes, but you're still learning,
Yeah.
And it's absolutely amazing. I love the stuff. So I just wanted to bring this to people's attention. So they're thinking, okay, well, am I infusing my personality to whether that is your newsletter or whatever type of content that you're making? Because I think that is actually something that is going to give you an edge. And it has actually been something that gave us an advantage when it's come to Content is Profit. Because people are like, man, you guys are so high energy, right? This is not what I was expecting from a podcast. And we're like, we love a Red Bull, But I think it's
$5 sushi sprints.
And $5 sushi sprints, right? But definitely it's an underlooked asset maybe that people don't really take into consideration that much.
Definitely. It's one of the most important things. So when we broke the business down, we kind of broke it down into this model that we call like the newsletter engine. And it sort of operates like a real engine. It basically turns attention into money, and the idea is basically you have like these growth funnels that filter attention down into your monetization strategies. But underneath all of that is what we call the product level. And the reason it's at the very bottom is because it is the foundation of everything. And when you're talking about product, you're talking about a few things. Yeah, you're talking about technology. But really what makes up the product is like the things that make the experience of your newsletter or whatever media company you're building unique. So that's your voice, your editorial strategy, the way you build community inside of your company. And by the way, one other thing I'll say, just related to this concept of the business model mattering more than the topic or the size of the audience, the model is universal. So we're talking about newsletters here, but once you know how this works, you'll actually see it being played out in multiple places. So like TikTok creators, Instagram creators, basically anybody who is turning attention into money is going to be doing it through this machine. And if they're using this model, they're going to be maximizing their their profits and their revenue. But a lot of people are just kind of like groping around in the dark trying to figure out how this works. And so hopefully what we can do here is just break it down, make it a little bit more approachable for people.
Yeah, I love it. I would love to dive into that. Before we do that, I want to mention, right, like through our journey publishing, that has been one of the bigger discoveries, right? Like there's always that shiny object syndrome of like this method, this tactic, this thing, right? And at the end of the day, at the bottom of it all, those are just different names for the same thing. Because as we started executing, for example, and for us, our framework is a publishing pyramid. We have a few ones like the minimum viable content, how we started. But at the end of the day, it's very similar to whatever platforms that you're using. And I love the fact that we're breaking down the newsletters because I see the similarities. Like I'm going through that model in my head with the podcast, and it's that thing, right? So on our side, right, you mentioned initially cash flow. Well, for us, it's a service, right?
Yep.
So like, just like the hustle was the events industry, for us, it was a service that we needed the cash because we have no investors, right? And we needed to eat initially. So we're like, how do we do this? Well, we need cash in the bank now. Okay, let's set a service. And that's how it really everything started a few years back. Now that we're in the phase of building that audience, being part of the Hotspot Podcast Network and the support and the years of experience, now we're starting to experiment on the product side of things, right? So there is a backside, right? And now that's the new phase that we've been experiencing over the last like 3 to 4 months, is that product phase. We're like listening to the audience, listening to what they need. We took on new projects to see like what the feedback is on new things, right? On these new calls to develop those products. So I see it very clearly, and I love it because same thing. You see it, you're like, you turn this lens that you put it in your like next to your eye, right? And you look at these individual creators and you look at this, like for example, Colin and Samir for the Published Press, right? They have an amazing business model, and they have an awesome episode the other day where they broke down kind of like the revenue, and they're known for a lot of YouTube, and they're like, the YouTube ad revenue is just about 10% of like the total thing that they do with their platforms, with their newsletter, with the things, right? But at the end of the day, it's the same framework. So I say this because there's a lot of people that might be listening today or watching that might be like, oh, that's cool, but let me keep looking. No, don't keep looking. Just keep listening to this episode because it's all the same, right? And we're gonna continue to give all the steps to this.
Yeah. No, that's a great way of putting it too. And you're absolutely right. I mean, basically all of these creator focused media, really what I talk about is like media brands, right? Are you building a media brand? And increasingly the answer for that is going to be yes, because even if you have, say, software as a service, right? More and more of these software companies are building media departments related to them because it's actually less expensive to hire writers or YouTubers or people who create great content than it is to just keep putting ads out, because that content performs over the long term. But you got to know how the media business works. So that's what we're going to get into here.
All right, let's dive in.
Like, tell me everything. Okay. I mean, where do we want to start? I have a question, right? Like, I think in your thread, you asked this question, like, where should people start with, let's say specifically newsletters, right? In this case, but should they do paid newsletters? Should they be free, right? This is a question that we've had for us. We're like, oh man, okay, there's an email list that's growing. How do we actually start doing this? Is it free for the show? Is it like a paid thing? Like, where do we do that? I'm sure like Fonzie has experienced a little bit more on that. He might have a follow-up questions to it, but where should people start looking into starting this journey?
Great question. Yeah. So, and like, as is so often the case in business, like the answer is sort of, it depends, but I'm going to give you some concrete stuff. So generally speaking, like I said, there are like a few components to this, right? Cash flow, audience, products. And when you break down that audience product model, you have like your free audience, which can be monetized via ads or affiliate deals. You have those low price front end products, and then you have your high price back end products. Now, the real truth is technically you can start with any one of those, and any one of those by themselves can be like a multi-million-dollar business, right? But you have to ask yourself, if you decide to start with a paid product, how are you going to get distribution for it? And so very often what you see is kind of the most common path is a company will start with a free offering of some kind. And that free offering is monetized via the ads and affiliate deals eventually, and used to funnel people towards the paid products. So I've seen this play out in a couple of ways. Like if you're thinking strictly about newsletters, let's say you only want to write one newsletter and you don't necessarily want it to be free. Okay, well, you can pull that off if you have an audience somewhere else. So if you have a podcast or you have a Twitter account or an Instagram account, something where you're already engaging with people and they're understanding like your story and the value that you could bring to the table, you can start with a paid newsletter right there. And I know a guy he's a business broker. And so he started a paid newsletter where he shares business listings super early. This thing is it's already doing like $10,000 plus a month in subscription revenue. He just started it earlier this year. And it was doing like 10K a month out of the gate. And the reason for that, there's two reasons. The first, like I said, he already had distribution through his Twitter account, right? That's really important. I think it's the one challenge that people run into when they think about this is they think if they just build a paid newsletter and turn it on, it's just going to start making money. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Even if you have an audience, like an existing audience, there are other things you have to get right for business newsletters to really work, or for paid newsletters to really work. And the main other thing, and this is something that I think he did well and other people would do well to copy, is your paid newsletter, or whatever your paid offering is, has to deliver more value than whatever you're doing for free. And specifically, what I tell people is, the shorter the line is between your paid product and how your audience makes money, the more likely you are to be able to pull it off as a business, right? So for him, he's selling business listings. He's giving people, like people who buy businesses, an upfront or early show, an early look at businesses that are for sale. It doesn't matter how much he charges them. If he charges them $1,000 a year, like one great business would more than make that up in the first month of owning it, you know? Yeah. So of course it worked for him. It worked really well. Other people, I think, struggle when they have, say, like, let's say, you know, let's just say me. I talk about newsletters a lot. So, and I talk about it for free over on Twitter. And yeah, I work for a paid newsletter company, but like, let's take that out of the equation for a second. If I was to start a paid newsletter tomorrow and just write about paid newsletters and how they work, there's a chance that people would buy it. But a lot of my free content is really similar to that. So if people bought it, they'd pretty much be buying it because they like me and they're just trying to support me, which is not a great way to build a business that scales. And you see this all the time with creators of different types. They'll have like a really popular YouTube channel or a really popular Instagram account, whatever, newsletter. And then they'll say something like, well, support us on our Patreon, or like, hey, if you like this and you want to buy me a cup of coffee, like there's a link below. And the problem with that, it can work, but what you're really relying on is whether or not people like you. It's not about how much value you're driving. And where people can do better is if they figure out, like, what are the features that I can actually offer somebody that is going to help. I mean, the easiest is going to help them make more money. That's not the only thing you can sell. Like, it, you know, you basically have to sell people things that they really want in their lives, but money's probably the easiest one. And so if you can figure out what parts of your content are most directly related to that, you have a much higher likelihood, and like peel it off from whatever your free offering is, you could start out of the gate with paid, and it can work pretty well as long as you have that distribution somewhere. So like for me, what I might do, like a different version of this would be, okay, I write about newsletters a lot. Sure. And I know that people who run newsletters, one of the major ways that they monetize is through advertisers. So, and one of the major ways to find advertisers is to look at a whole bunch of other newsletters. And so I could easily create a business where I sell like a database of people who are advertising in newsletters right now. And then I just, you know, go through 500 different newsletters. I look at all their sponsors and I compile a whole bunch of stats on who's advertising, and then, you know, the LinkedIn contact for all the like people who might buy advertising at those companies, and just sell that list. Here's a whole bunch of people that could make your newsletter more money because they're already buying ads. Now that is much more likely to get me money as a content creator out of the gate than just saying, hey, I can teach you about newsletters, like go pay for my Patreon or something. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm going in my head through some scenarios. You know, one, we've talked a lot about a soccer project. Soccer has been a massive part of our life. And we're like, at some point, we'd like to give back and build something there, right? And early on, we had this idea of like the $1 Soccer Club.
Shout out to you for making a comeback this Friday on a soccer league.
We're gonna come back
Let's
and
go.
play. I know. You know, hopefully the people don't mistake me with the ball. That's how round I am at the moment. But with that, like the newsletter topic has come up, right? And in my head, I'm thinking you made it very clear where it's like, okay, the shorter the line is between that and the desire, right? Like obviously we're in a business sense, so revenue, right? And profit, how do we connect it? But I'm going through, okay, what's the desire? And I'm going through your thread at the moment, and we can talk about this in a bit, but about like how niche should it be, right? So I'm going through my scenario. Okay, soccer-wise, how niche should it be for, let's say, kids from 13 to 18, and the value is, hey, here all the tryouts, here the contact info of these people if you want to go become pro at a different country, for example, right? So that could be something very interesting to explore. But after that, right, obviously right now with Content Profit and Content Momentum, we serve B2B companies, right? So what are some models that you've seen, right, with B2B companies, and why is that advantageous for them to build a platform, a media company like that you mentioned earlier, but initially on a newsletter, right? Like a lot of these people that we've talked to, some of them have hesitation on sharing a lot of that information, right? And with newsletters, we share a lot of information. So why would a B2B company
tackle something like this?
Great question. So, real quick side note related to what you just said. If I'm understanding it correctly, you're saying there's a possibility that you could start like a newsletter specifically for soccer players who are thinking of going like pro or playing in college, something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
That's
one of the ideas in the pod.
That's the idea board. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, just to show like how wide ranging this opportunity is, I actually know a guy who does that for football, and for American football. Sorry for my actual football plan. It's American football. Imposter football. But he was positioned well because he already had a pre-existing audience, and he's like very interesting player because he played I think it was D1. And he's also got like a whole business degree. He's got a whole career outside of this. And what he basically teaches students how to do is plan for their sports career while also taking care of their financial career in case sports doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. That business did $20,000 in its first month as his side project. He had to slow it down because he teaches full time. And so to answer a couple of your questions about like how niche can this be? Really, I don't think there's a limit in terms of how niche something can be if you understand the business model. And again, that business model is free products, monetized via ads or affiliate deals. And maybe I should dig into that for just a second because it'll help explain the answer to your next question, which is like, why would B2Bs do this? Free products, low price paid subscriptions. And when I say low price, what I mean is the range on that is typically $50 to $100 a year. So you're talking like $5 to $10 a month, roughly in that range. And then high priced back-end subscriptions. And when we say high price, that's usually like $500 and up per year. And that can go all the way up into the many, many thousands of dollars. So just to dig a little bit deeper on the free thing real quick, and this will be important because it'll help show why why this might make sense for B2Bs. So when I say monetize via ads or affiliate deals, ads are obviously display ads. So what you have is a sales person who is reaching out to companies and selling them a placement in the newsletter. There are several different ways that you can charge for those types of placements. We can dig into that later if people want to know more about it. But generally speaking, you're charging for an ad that's going into your newsletter, and they're paying you based on some kind of like performance. So maybe they'll pay you a flat fee based on how big your list is, or maybe they'll pay you based on how many clicks there are. But they're paying to get in front of your audience upfront. The other affiliate model, obviously, is a performance-based ad. So you're including links, and basically you only get paid if you sell something. Now, why this could matter to B2Bs is that, like, depending on what industry you're in, if you like, one way to monetize these, or one reason to potentially run a newsletter, is that it's going to build more authority for you in your space, right? That's right out of the bat. I mean, content is profit. Rule number one, right? This stuff builds authority, helps fill your pipeline. But more importantly, especially for like small businesses, you can monetize these with relatively little effort. And I actually think B2Bs are in a better position to do this than a lot of consumer newsletters. And the reason is the price on a lot of things that businesses need is just very high. So when you're selling affiliate products through a newsletter, you stand to make a lot more money if you're selling to like high-end business leaders than if you're selling, $15 flashlights to kids who are reading about like startup news or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the price tag is just a lot higher. And so the beauty of the newsletter is really that. One, it's going to build you authority. Two, it can become a revenue, like a serious revenue stream for your company. And I think that's the big thing. Like we mentioned, the list that I know of that's doing $100,000 on a 1,000 subscriber list. Have I told you what the niche for that is? That you guys want to know?
Yeah, please tell us. Something weird. I mean, we talked about the football. We talked about.
Well, you talked about the farmer.
The farmer.
Yeah. Is that it?
No. It's a B2B newsletter for people who own photo booth businesses.
Wow.
How niche is that? It's
niche.
super small.
I've only met one guy in my life that has that business.
There's not that many. I mean, like 1,000 people on this list, and I would bet he's got pretty much all of them.
I bet that one guy I know he's part of that list.
Yeah. But the beauty of it is it's so narrow that like when you write for that audience, they immediately know that you're the person they want to pay attention to, right? Because there's not a lot of people trying to get the attention of people who own photo booth businesses. Business owners, sure, right? People in the wedding industry, sure. But like when you get that specific, it's like, how many options do these people have for real news about their industry? And it is an industry. It's a whole industry, right? So that newsletter does well. Now, some people who are running bigger businesses, they may look at 6 figures and that's just like a rounding error for them. If that's the case, fine. Don't worry about the revenue so much. Just know that like the authority side of this is big.
Yeah. So, okay. This is a question I've had for the last couple of minutes in my head. What if, let's say we want to start this soccer newsletter. Again, we're probably going to come back and use that as an example just because it's, so close to our hearts. But let's say we don't want to be the face of it and we don't want to post at all on our like personal profiles. We're starting with 0 audience, right? Like nobody to share this with. We have the idea. We are going to be the writers. How do we start getting some traffic in there? How do we start getting people to sign up? Is it, direct response marketing in a way that you're, targeting people with ads and then just calculating your cost per acquisition, all that thing? Or, creating organic content? What would be maybe, or is it a balance of both, right? What is the best way to start driving traffic in there?
Great question. So let me talk about 2 things. First is the growth levers. There's like what we found over the course of studying like several of these newsletters, especially in the early stages, was there are effectively 3 levers for growth that you can pull as a media company: time, money, and audience. And the one that you pull is basically going to come down to which one you have most access to. So
Time. What was it? Time?
Yep. Time, money, and audience. So time is like your all your free growth tactics, organic social media, SEO, PR, like getting talked about by other media outlets. And really at the high level, what time is about getting other people to talk about you, right? And we can dig into that in a second. Money is pretty obvious. It's paid advertising, whether that's through PPC ads or influencers or other like, search ads, stuff like that. Yeah. And then audience is when your audience gets to be big enough that it is becoming like a sizable growth lever for you as well. And you mentioned the referrals that are at the bottom of the Morning Brew and the Hustle. That's an example of like an audience-based growth strategy. So which one of those do you pull? Well, it depends which one you have the most access to. A lot of people, when they're first starting, probably would have a lot of time, right? And so they would be focused on like free strategies. Now, in the super, super early days of a newsletter, what I encourage people to do is like, you got to think of a few people that who would be good clients for this. Because if you don't know anybody that would be a good client for this, don't do it, right? Right?
Yeah.
And if you look at like Cody Sanchez is a great example of this. So a lot of people know her on Twitter. She runs Contrarian Thinking. They grew that to 10,000 subscribers in 30 days, I think it was. And she charted the entire course of it. People can go look it up. But it was very like super, super manual outreach early on. She, started by emailing everybody that she knows and just saying, hey, I'm starting this thing. Would you like to subscribe to it? People often skip that because they think somehow the audience is going to come from somewhere else.
Yeah. Or I don't want to bother the people that I know.
Exactly. Yeah. And I get it, man. I get it. Like I've forced myself through this situation enough times where it's like, I still feel it every time I think about launching something new. But yeah, in the case of the soccer newsletter, or basically any other newsletter people are thinking of starting from scratch, the advice would be first look at those 3 levers. Well, actually, before you even do that, just who do you know who's already a good client for this? Yeah. Send it to them, right? That's the easiest thing. You can do this in 5 minutes. Once you get a few people, and like if a couple of your friends have actually signed up for it, these people who you think are going to be good clients, then it's time to start looking at those 3 levers and go, okay, what's the content or what's the marketing plan that we're going to do? And I think this may be where things differ a little bit for your audience as opposed to some other ones, because like you said, you work with a lot more business owners. So maybe they do have budget right out of the gate.
Yeah.
However, generally speaking, and this isn't like my advice. This comes from what I've seen just in terms of the growth path of other newsletters. Generally speaking, it's a pretty safe rule of thumb to if you're say you're doing like a general like industry news newsletter, right? You're going to want to grow that to a certain capacity before you start paying for advertising. And the reason for that is ads can be expensive. You want to make sure that you have like a product market fit, editorially speaking, before you start dumping money into advertising.
Yeah.
And you just need to work out a lot of systems, right? Like, are you weekly or daily? And like, who's writing it? What's the voice? There's all these other things to work on early on. So we don't typically recommend people start with ads, but time, money, and audience are the three things that you'll eventually pull. And, you know, a super, super overrated one on the time side is just reaching out to your existing network and asking them to sign up for it.
Yeah, we've talked about this many times on the prospecting and outreach, right? Like a lot of people have that fear, right? Of like, okay, well, I feel you got, for those listening, FONZI is like raising both hands. But and it has been a big part of the journey, right? Like for us, we had to like sell from day one, right? Without that, there's no business, no food, and I think a lot of people or like overlook that because it's not even an option. Like it's not even a thing in their minds. That could be, you know, a big challenge. So again, I ask myself this question every time we go, do we actually believe in the message that we're sharing? For example, with Content is Profit, absolutely, right? Like I'm going to tell everybody about the podcast, everybody and their mom, right? And then on the service, same thing. I believe that we bring so much value to those businesses that of course I'm going to be continue to have that conversation with that. And that really helped me. So on the newsletter topic or content or whatever you're creating, I think that's super important. Like look back and be like, okay, do I actually really believe in this topic? Do I really want to share with this? Do I really have the passion that I need to endure long hours of research and writing, if that's just you, right? Or do you have the patience to hire that team, right? And resources to hire that team and provide feedback every single day for them to execute on this, right? For example, Sean, right, with the Milk Road, right? Like he's deeply passionate about crypto and these things, right? And his business partner, I'm sure as well. And that's why they're able to do this. And he likes to write. Like he has a writing course. So all these elements obviously make part of the formula. So I encourage, if you're listening right now, whether that's a podcast, whether that's a newsletter, right? Take inventory of those things. Like, do I really want it? Do I really have it? And that's not an easy conversation to have because sometimes we're blinded by chasing the money, right? Then we're like, yeah, of course I have it. And then as soon as we start executing, things like fall off the cracks. And they're going to fall off the cracks. That's okay. That's like the thing that happens all the time. It's just, okay, reassess and go back to it. And maybe that's not the path. And then should we try something different, right? So I think that's very important when it comes to creating, producing, and even monetizing content.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two questions here. I'll let you pick whichever you want first, you know, but I'm just going to put them out there into the world. The first one is you kind of mentioned industry news-based newsletters, right? Which is, I'll say, kind of like the Hustle, Morning Brew, right? The Milk Road. And then we have, let's say, expert-based newsletters, which is more like people's opinions and, you know, their lessons. Again, they're the expert. And that's kind of like what we, at least, were more into at first with the whole, you know, direct response world and ClickFunnels, right? Russell Brunson has his own newsletter. I don't know, probably thousands of subscribers. And that's how he sells a lot of his product too, is through his newsletter. So I'm curious, like, which one, do you see any advantages or disadvantages between these ones? What do you recommend for a business to start? Maybe is it better, you know, in the industry-based industry news or an expert one? And then the other question that I had, again, I'm just putting them both out there, is we talked about, okay, driving traffic, how do we kickstart this? But now, let's say we got people, you know, wanting to read this thing, and it's a process of how do we put this thing together? And you talked about having researchers or writers, right? People that are giving you their time to write. And I'm curious on how do you get those two? You're not gonna lie, I'm like, that idea is so enticing, right? I'm guessing you probably have the role more of the editor, where you have people writing and then they send stuff to you, you review it, make changes, and then you kind of have the last word when it comes to publishing it. So those are the two questions. I'm throwing the ball back at you. You pick whatever you want to answer first.
Good. Well, they're good questions. I think they actually both roll up into this broader category of editorial strategy. So when I think about the first question, I actually approach it a little different than the way that you framed it. So broadly speaking, I the question that you asked is important, but it wouldn't be the first one that I would ask when I was thinking about starting a newsletter. The first one that I would ask would be like, what is the outcome? Because as we mentioned a couple of times, there are a few different outcomes that you can shoot for. Like if influence is your most important outcome, then you're going to want to think through that lens first, right? Like, well, how am I going to influence my particular market? Now there's going to be a very different answer for that for somebody who considers their market to be like, software developers versus somebody who considers their market to be like the head of purchasing at, or what is it? Assistant to the head of purchasing at a paper company or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like it depends on who your business is trying to profile and how big that audience is. So if it's a fairly niche market, then I think you can, you just want to be thinking through like, what is the actual outcome before you think about what does the product look like? And so that's kind of how I think about number one. The thing I'll add to that is I talked to Dan Oshinsky, who he led newsletters at BuzzFeed, and then he went and like launched the newsletter program at the New Yorker. And he says that like broadly speaking, there are a few different types of newsletters that people read and write. And like he actually kind of buckets it down into I don't want to misquote him, but it's like, one is like utility. So it gives people what they need. And that's kind of what we were talking about in terms of having a very short line between how people make money and what they're getting from you. Another is like gives them what they want, right? So if you were to like, I think the hustle is a little bit more like giving people what they want, which is kind of fun news daily. It's like kind of a refreshing break. It keeps me up to date.
Stay in the loop.
Give me something interesting to talk about, but it's not really going to like my job's not going to go away if I don't read the hustle or something like that. It might if you stop reading the hustle, but it wouldn't go. Then the two other ones are like personality, which is, I actually think that that's a little closer to what you were describing in terms of like expertise. Yeah. So when you have somebody like Pomp who writes about crypto, crypto is important, but really people are weighing in. They're coming there because they want Pomp's opinion on it, right? Or these other like personality-based newsletters. Those are a little harder to make work if you don't have a pre-existing audience. If you do have a pre-existing audience, they're a pretty good moat because people can't come in and I can't give you Pomp's opinion on something. So he's got a pretty big moat around it. And the last one is related to like identity. So what do you identify as? And so like BuzzFeed, I think the newsletter that they launched was called something like Today in Cats or something like that. And it was basically like news for cat people. And it would, they'd have like funny cat memes and stuff like that. And so the newsletter revolved around this mindset where people like part of their, maybe they work in tech or maybe they're a trucker or whatever, but part of their identity is related to, I'm a cat person too. And so that's one way you can reach people. But for all four of those, it's important to kind of think about what your outcome is first and why you're trying to build this. And you don't have to get it perfect because the reality is, as with any business, you're going to iterate your way through this. But just think like, what's more important to you? Do you want to build influence or do you want this thing to be cash flowing? And if it's the cash flow one, then you have to decide, is that going to be through a paid product or is it going to be through ads? Because, those are two different size audiences.
Absolutely. I'm gonna throw here. Sorry, before you continue. Sometimes we throw in random ideas like spaghetti to see if they stick into the wall. As you're talking right now, I was like, let me test this idea with you. What about a newsletter that is kind of like,
I have another one.
Like industry-based news, but it's about personalities, right? So we grab like Pomp's opinions, right? Or, Sean's opinion and Sam's opinion, and then we distill it into a newsletter. So instead it's like, hey, you don't need to go scrolling through Twitter, right? X amount of hours a week. We'll do it for you, and we'll just bring you the best of what they're saying.
I mean, what you're saying is a perfect. It basically reflects your understanding and just the vast amount of opportunity in this space. It's totally feasible. I mean, you might run into issues like licensing people's images, but maybe not. I don't really know what the rules on that are. But the bigger point is like, yeah, exactly. What you just said is exactly possible. And there's a million different versions of that too. Like, for example, I said earlier, you can't really out morning brew, right? But you can do morning news for somebody that you don't feel is being like represented currently. So like I know a kid, young guy, he's like 21 or 22, and he's basically building The Hustle for Spanish speaking countries because for whatever reason we don't translate our newsletter, right? We just haven't done it.
We just got so upset. We just got so upset. We're like, we speak Spanish, bro. Like we should be doing this.
We need to meet that guy because we need to partner with him at some degree. So just saying, after camera time, we need to connect. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, let me know, and I'll connect you to. He's a sharp kid, and he's like, awesome. I've seen the newsletter; it's doing really well. So the other thing, one of my other favorites is Glow Reel. So Shilpa Bim, she's actually a Trends member, and she started this newsletter. It's like, I think it's weekly right now, but I get it. It's either it's a couple of times a week or weekly. It's news for BIPOC women. And I don't know what BIPOC stands for, but it's like, women of color, like basically underrepresented women, like Indian women, Black women. She's originally from Australia, so there's like a whole Aboriginal or like population there. But she's writing this incredible newsletter, and it's very similar to The Hustle in like structure, voice, topics that they cover, but it's all from this other perspective, which unfortunately is completely underrepresented inside of like broader media. And kind of the result of that is like, I'm not joking when I tell you it's one of my favorite newsletters. And part of the reason is because it's full of stories that you just never find anywhere else, right? Yeah. Like, unfortunately, there's just nobody reporting on this. So there's a million iterations of this that can be really good. And I guarantee you, Glow Reel is going to be as big or bigger than The Hustle at some point. She's killing it. So the opportunity is really endless. I think the thing people need to think through is like, what's the outcome that you're after? And then I think the other thing that if I could bring one thing to the table with this, the conversations that we're having, it's just setting people up with the right understanding of how the business actually works and like what expectations to set. Because one thing that I think people struggle with is, they'll see somebody like Sean's a great example. So he's writing the Milk Road, which editorially is one of the best newsletters that's out there right now. And they're doing an excellent job with voice, an excellent job with community building. They're experimenting with all kinds of different types of content, which is fantastic. They have grown from 0 to 150,000 plus readers in 6 months. Wow. Now, part of that is because they're writing a tremendous newsletter, and you really can't. There's no growth hack that's going to like overcome the fact that your content sucks. If you write a bad newsletter, it's just not going to work, right? But another part of it is that Sean is pretty well known. He's got 250,000 Twitter followers. He's got one of the top 50 podcasts in the world right now. Yep. And they've got, a significant growth budget to throw at that. Now, like I said, they write a killer email. And so they absolutely earned all that success. Where it becomes dangerous for other people is if they look at that and go, oh, well, they went from 0 to 150K in 6 months, which means that's what I should be able to accomplish. Without the same resources, without the same background. Sean's been building his online audience for like half a decade now, right? Yeah, so unless you have the visibility into these case studies to really understand what they're doing and really understand what the real numbers are, like, yes, you can go from 5 years from now, if you invest in your content for 5 years, yeah, you can probably launch something that does 150,000 subscribers in 6 months. But you got to know that first. Otherwise, you can get totally overwhelmed when 6 months from now you haven't hit that number. So just like setting more realistic standards, I think, and giving people the roadmap to actually like achieve it, because it's totally doable. I've seen it happen over and over and over again for people who know what the actual equation is.
Yeah, that's insane. We're after this conversation, Marva and I are gonna put like all the ideas that we got of the newsletters. We're gonna be like, okay, let's pick one. Which one are we gonna do?
Yeah, you just steered the pot big time, Ethan. Just gonna put that out there.
And if you're listening, I would love to hear what are your ideas of newsletters. So just send us a message at BIZBROS on Facebook, on Instagram. That'll be fun to check out what ideas you guys have.
Yeah. So we talked obviously a lot about the early stages.
Wait. He hasn't. He has to dive into the second question, right? The writers and the
editorial strategy.
That was asked like 40 minutes ago. Okay.
Hey man, I got you. No worries.
I can keep this one pretty quick. So I'm actually a writer. I mean, I guess, I've been there for a couple of years now. So I have some I guess I serve as like writer / editor. We keep a pretty lean team on trends, even trends and the hustle. I think we're probably a total of 10 people altogether.
Lean and mean.
Yeah, but there's like now we're rolled up inside HubSpot Media, which is so big. It touches all the podcasts. I mean, you guys know podcast network, YouTube, everything. So there's quite a bit more people there now. But the thing I think people need to know about editorial when they're just starting out, there's like maybe one or two things. It doesn't have to be a big team. Like you can do this yourself. And, you know, you can kind of make if you know how the business model works and you know what your outcome is, you can kind of set the rules up however it is that you want to play it. So as an example, like people look at the hustle and they think, oh, I have to write a daily newsletter in order to be successful. That's not true. You don't have to. In fact, the hustle started off as a weekly newsletter. A lot of people don't know that. You can start off writing it yourself and slowly bring writers in. You can curate news instead of writing it all yourself. There's like a million different ways you could do this. One thing that I think is important to know, though, is that like the content has to be good in order for it to travel. Yeah. And when we can talk about different ways to do that, but like hiring writers it's hard. It's probably one of the harder things. In fact, one time I asked Sam, I said, what surprised you about, like the reality of running a multi-million-dollar business when you got to that stage? And he said two things. First, it's surprisingly hard to keep everybody kind of rowing in the same direction. Like nobody really talks about how difficult that is. And the second was how hard it is to hire good writers. So if you go into this and you want to try and find writers to do it, spend the time to find somebody that really aligns with your vision of what the product could be.
Yeah.
Don't just outsource it, because if you just outsource it and they're not creating what you really envision the thing could be, you're just wasting your time and money. If you can find somebody, who work inexpensively and can create something that you think is an amazing product, great, more power to you. Yeah. But just make sure you think it's amazing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I want to do a quick parenthesis here and give a huge shout out. Right, our team right now has been with us almost 2 years, all of them, and we relate so much with the importance of this, because before that we encountered some friction in many ways. We didn't have really the resources or the mission or the goal. The objective was there, and we started focusing on, okay, you guys are gonna be coming into this bus. The bus might go in different directions. Are you guys good with that? And that was a conversation that we would say at the very beginning, and we're very proud to have them be part of this family and grow with us, because we've pivoted quite a few times and in different ways, part of the back end of the service, right, and different things. And I relate so much, right? So for us, it was not an easy task. Yeah. So I want people to pay attention really to this part, right? And maybe if you can share like one or two tips, like where do people go to find these people? Like what are some frameworks that people can follow to hire this? Because this applies to not just the newsletter, right, as writers, but also currently with video content, right? A lot of video editors. We talk a lot about building your own resources, your internal like media company, right? That can look like just you and your video editor, right? Or just you as well, right? All these principles apply. So what are some things that's maybe one or two things that people can do very effectively, right, initially in that journey?
Totally. Yeah. So the best tip I ever got on this, I think, was from Lexi Grant. Lexi is like a badass media founder. She's founded and sold multiple companies. She helped build I think it's called the Penny Pincher, which ultimately the Penny Hoarder. That's the one. Yeah. Sold for $100 million cash. Insane. She's awesome. She's building a new company right now called They Got Acquired, which is all about, well, people can go check it out. It's awesome. She told me, she says that when she hires writers, she doesn't worry so much about the quality of the first draft. What she pays more attention to is how they respond to feedback and edits. Like, what does the second draft look like? Because the first draft, like especially early on in your newsletter, you're not even going to be completely sure what you want this thing to look like. And that's okay. But you need writers who are able to adapt, like you just said, and kind of fit your vision. And that's a skill. So if somebody's not doing that, their second, third drafts, they're just not showing improvement, cut them loose early and find somebody else, because there are writers out there who can come much closer. And, I guess related to that, she does a lot of work like on a contract basis. So she'll actually pay for somebody to do their first test project. And, you pay a decent amount of money. I mean, this varies from industry to industry, but like right now, the hustle will pay, I think it's like anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 for like a full length deep dive from professional writers. Doesn't have to be that much. And again, we're in a different position than a lot of people just in terms of what we're trying to get out of our content. But just understand that like when you're talking about content, and you guys know this, right? It like you pay for quality. You get what you pay for, right? So when it comes to whether it's somebody who's creating it or somebody who's kind of like guiding you along the way, that would be my recommendation is like invest in the quality and pay attention to draft 2.
Oh, so good. I'm going through that process, and like for us, I'm like, we're not too far off, right? And by not knowing that, we paid for contract work initially. Be like, hey, here's a sample project, go do it. Let's figure out. For us, was more about the initial side of things, but you know, how do you bring that to, let's say, podcasting or video content, right? Which it's a lot of the people are listening right now. Same thing, right? You can bring them on, pay them for like, hey, look, I want 5 micro content pieces of this episode. Go do it. They'll probably come back to something, provide that feedback and see how they react to that one feedback they want me, like maybe provide with some examples, right? Maybe ask them to bring some examples, right? How proactive are they in that homework that they got to do? I mean, shout out to My First Million, right? Like they did that contest with a 5K with all these video editors and they got millions and millions of impressions of their show. And out of that, they picked, 1 or 2 people that now create content for them or build businesses around it. Full disclosure, we did apply, we didn't win. It's okay.
Yeah, we're not holding.
I'm pretty sure the guy who did win was like living in a dorm room somewhere. He's just one of these guys who like grew up on the internet, and he's just incredible.
I mean, we saw the videos. The videos are awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's amazing because like the opportunities like that, right? Let's say you're in the newsletter industry, right? You're always going to be exposed to content. And one of the questions that we always ask is like, hey, what content are you consuming, right? Because there's a difference between consuming for just consuming or consuming with seeking that knowledge, what's happening, what's working, what's not working, right? Whether that's video, whether that's newsletter. And same thing, like that's feedback that you can provide to your team. Be like, hey, this is maybe something that's resonating in this industry. Keep in mind resources as well. We talked about that earlier, right? Different moments in the history of the company. But hey, maybe these are things that we can use. Maybe these are the principles that they're following that people can use. So for those listening, take in that information and then provide it. And then that was so good.
I think that's a good segue into research side of things, right? How do people or how do you guys manage that? Or what have you seen, by talking to these different companies? Do you guys have specific researchers? And I'm sure this might change, obviously, depending on people's resources. But me personally, when I think about, okay, I would like to write a newsletter, probably more scary than writing the actual newsletter is that, I have to do all this research. What am I gonna, what's the information that I'm gonna pull? You mentioned at the very beginning, what was it? The showmanship, right? Like, what are those viral pieces of content that I know that I can pull in here?
You can just leave the showmanship to me, man.
Yeah, I'm not sure you guys have a problem with showmanship.
When it comes to the written word, right? It might be a whole different challenge.
Totally. So I have a couple of tips on this, and they come from people who are much more inspiring than me. So I've talked to a bunch of people about this. Some of my favorites are like Sam is really great at it, and he and I had a couple conversations about this. Also, we write a long form email at The Hustle called our Sunday story, which is usually much more like in-depth sort of exploratory piece about something that most people have never heard of. For example, we wrote about like the guy who repos airplanes, right? Or like, the monopoly that owns pretty much the entire market on ice cream truck sound boxes, like just these weird things that you've never heard of before.
Yeah.
The guy who writes that is his name, or one of the guys who writes it is Zach Crockett. And so both these guys, I really respect their storytelling talent, and I've gotten some tips from them. So the one that comes from Zach is related to what you look for in writers who are going to be able to pull this off. And by far the biggest thing is curiosity. He said this in an interview we did recently. He says, and I would agree with it because it's definitely the thing that we look for on trends when we're hiring new analysts. You will benefit from hiring writers who are intensely curious about the thing that you're trying to write about. And specifically, like for us, we don't like what curiosity really helps you do is surface stories that people aren't going to write about somewhere else because you're just kind of going through your day and all of a sudden you notice something and you go like, like, I wonder why is that? Like here, I'll give you an example. Okay. So this is a soda can, right? and you can return these for money, right?
Mhm.
The whole thing is aluminum, including the tab, but the machine that you return it to doesn't care whether the tab is on it or off it. So like technically you can pull this off and then you could save a bunch of these and then return that for like even more money if you just like split these two things up, right? Well, that's kind of interesting. Is there anybody who's doing that? And you look into it, you pull back the layers, and like there are people who are doing this, and they're doing it at a huge level. And then if you kind of you spend time in this world where you're researching stories, you know how to like find communities of just kind of like weird people who are out there doing really interesting things or things that you would never think of. You see it, you pass a million soda cans a day. You never think about the economics of just the tabs, right? But there's a whole industry there. There's a whole history there. And so what you're looking for when you're staffing editorial teams are people who like, they have to be able to get the work done, right? You can't have somebody who's so curious they can never write anything, but you want people who are like just naturally curious.
Problem, by the way.
Nah, that's not a problem.
And then as for the showmanship thing, like I think there's two tips that I got from Sam that really work well for this. One is related to where do you find stories? And the reality is a lot of communities will tell you what it is that they want to hear about. So one way that he does this, and we use this at The Hustle and at Trends. If you're ever researching an industry or an idea, there's the first good way to really dig into it is to go find a whole bunch of online communities where people who like that thing congregate to talk about other people. And so that could be Facebook groups, it could be Twitter, it could be Reddit. But if you go to a lot of these communities, like say Reddit, you can go in there and you can sort the conversations by most popular, and then you can sort the replies by most popular. And then what you have, if you do that, you have topics that the community has sort of de facto told you have a high likelihood of traveling through the community. And so the example that I give is like, let's say you're in the fitness space, right? And you're looking for ideas. Like, okay, so you go to the home gym subreddit, and then you sort the topics by most popular. And the top post is like, here's the 50 pieces of gym equipment that you need to be super successful in your workout. And then you sort the comments by most popular. And like the first one is, hey, you can make a lot of these at home from stuff that you just buy at Home Depot. And maybe the second one is like, well, hey, here's this Chinese brand that's, 10% the cost, but it's just as good as Rogue Fitness. Okay. Now you're looking at this and instantly, okay, you have a topic, which is pieces of home equipment that you need, right? And you could easily write an article about the 50 pieces of home equipment that you can make from Home Depot or whatever, or, the secret Chinese brand that is going to save you 90% on your home gym. And it's not like a super genius hack, but the reality is these communities will tell you what they want to know about. If you know how to go out and find those topics and then just you layer on your voice, you layer on your curiosity, you can create things that they're not guaranteed to go viral, but there's just like a much higher likelihood because they've already proven themselves,
Other than that, Reddit.
Wait. Yes.
Yes.
That is the sound
of a
golden boulder.
Just like,
This is so good, man. This is so good. I feel like people just go with the mindset of, let me just read and see if I can find something. But you just gave a whole roadmap of how to discover these interesting ideas that people already want to know, and then how to further that, and all through your curiosity. Dude, thank you.
Ethan, first of all, you're solving my content problem for like the next 4 months. I already have like the notes of like all the individual videos that we're going to be creating based on frameworks and different things. Obviously this episode, amazing. Do you have, like, other than Reddit, right? Where are some places that people can go and find this topic? Obviously Reddit, is the homepage of the internet, right? It's amazing. Me personally, this is crazy. I personally have to dive in a lot more into Reddit.
I love Reddit, but it's a black hole, man. You
need to put the boundaries right on. Hey, this is like work mode. Put your glasses on, and this is why I'm doing it. But other than that, Reddit, like, what are some other ways, maybe like one or two, that people can go and do this?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give you a couple, but before I do, I just want to speak to kind of the philosophy so that people can develop their own as well. The key idea that we lean on at Trends. So I guess for people who don't know, I mentioned it up top. Trends is all about like emerging business opportunities that you probably haven't heard of. And every single week we write several articles on like industries that are growing And most of the time we aim for like 60 to 80% of people not to have heard of this thing, right? So how do we find those week after week? Well, the thing that you have to know, and this goes for every industry, right, is that information doesn't move evenly through society. There are people right now who are talking about things that are only going to be mainstream 10 years from now. But they're talking about them. And not only are they talking about them, they're spending real money on them and they're putting real effort into them. And if you know where to go to find these people, you can uncover things that are like they're already mainstream. The effect just hasn't happened yet, right? Like Peter Drucker talks about this. There's a famous saying that says the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Well, what a lot of people don't know about that saying is that he said that 30 years ago. And when he said it, he was talking about the need to avoid a situation where VR is controlled by mega corporations once it becomes really realistic, right? Which is exactly the situation that we're in now. So right now, people are talking about things that are going to be important 10, 20 years from now, or even less, 6 months from now, a year from now. If you know where you can find them, you can start to uncover those things. So the way that I think about this is almost that like information moves like a river, and you're looking for these like confluence points way upstream where you have individual practitioners who are now coming out and sharing knowledge with other individual practitioners. And so Reddit's a great place for something like that. Super niche Facebook groups, like I mentioned Zach a minute ago. When he's researching a topic, one of the first things he does is he goes on Facebook, he'll search for the topic, and then he just joins the top 5 groups that are related to that thing. Other great ones are like, I really love super niche VC blogs. Like, there's what I'm talking about is not just like, not just the big ones like, Andreessen Horowitz or something like that, but go find the super niche blogs for VCs who focus specifically on your industry, because they're out there talking to startups at the very front edge of whatever's going on in your industry every single day, and they're incentivized to make those things more mainstream. So they're gonna be talking about ideas that a lot of people aren't talking about. I also love like wealth management funds, specifically any fund that writes about short positions that they hold, because the way a lot of these research reports are done is like, I mean, it's fantastic. It's like having an entire research team go out and pre-vet an idea for you, So like, as an example, there's this company, I actually think they have a short position on HubSpot, which is funny, but they have one on SpaceX too. And it's just really interesting to read through their reasoning for like, so they go out, they'll talk to satellite manufacturers. They'll go out and they'll talk to people who used to work at Jeff Bezos's company, or people who used to work at Tesla. And so you get all this insight into the industry, and then they're arguing their point. You can believe it or not, but it's like having an entire research team go out and pre-vet things for you. So anywhere you can find these areas where operators are coming out and trying to share information with other operators, you're going to find really interesting stories and information that a lot of people aren't widely talking about yet.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Aren't you afraid of like running out of, businesses that people haven't heard about?
No, because it's a good question, but no, because the reality of the world that we live in today is that the internet has made so many niches viable. And you see this with like hard goods, but also, as we've been talking about for the last little while now, newsletters. The opportunities are growing exponentially. They're not, there's no like sort of zero-sum game in terms of opportunity.
Yeah.
So no, I think our biggest problem is like finding enough time to write about everything that we find.
Yeah. I'm curious, man. How many words do you write a day? Like, especially, I'm so curious about that.
It's probably less than you'd think. So people talking about newsletters, I mentioned you can kind of make the rules however you want. So we are a weekly newsletter, which means our writers publish about one article per week. You get rounded up and put into the email. The email is about 2,000 words. So our articles are actually pretty short. I'm doing like 500 to 1,000. Probably actually closer to like 1,000 to 1,500 words a week, just with all the different sections that we have in the newsletter. But the reality is, like, when you make your decisions editorially about how you're going to structure things, you're always thinking about trade-offs. So for us, one of the reasons that we're weekly and one of the reasons that we keep things really short is because, and you guys know this just from reading the newsletter, like we lean much more on like short, punchy insights that can explain, like we try to be able to explain an entire industry in 500 to 1,000 words. So the amount of research that goes into that is just a lot more than you could do on a daily basis. Like you need a week to really digest and like understand these spaces. But the flip side of that is, well, you don't have to publish every single day. So if you're in a position where you're thinking of starting a newsletter and you want to be able to offer like I think there's a lot of opportunity for B2Bs in real industry analysis. There's so much high level clickbait BS out there these days. It's just not helpful to people who are actually in the industry. So if you want to start something, like go deep and actually layer on some real experience, real expertise. Take the time to track down interviewees and talk to them. That kind of thing, you're never going to run out of opportunities there. There will always be a market for it.
I that's how I feel with especially with Content is Profit, right? Like part of us is like screw the bullshit that's out there, like it's all clickbait. And we have this discussion this morning with the team. We're like, should we make this like more clickbaity or not? And the discussion was about like, are we actually delivering on the promise, right? And I lean towards like the you know the showmanship side of things a lot more than Fonzie does. On my side, I believe.
No, I love the showmanship, but we were talking about, you know, the moral line of clickbait and then, you know, what's on the other side,
which could be a whole episode on its own, right? Like, but for the podcast, for example, we go to the direct source, right? Like we vet the people that come onto the show. For example, they have very successful businesses, they dealing with content in very unique ways, and it's awesome, right? The source of that info. So that your picture of the river and finding those little streams, like the thought authority at the top. That's kind of what we've been mimicking with Content's Profit, and more now that we've had more experience, and there comes the leverage side of it. It comes like the experience side of it. I'm not shy of going and ask, right? I think that's super valuable because just like I mentioned a few minutes ago, this episode alone, which is going to be coming in a bunch of series, right? If you're listening, you're probably like at the end of the series at the moment, but not just that, but it also, you share a bunch of frameworks that we can dissect, that we can go, that we do a lot of more research. Like this is going to be content for a long, long time that we can continue to do that. So for B2B or for people that are there trying to create their own platforms, right? Or for CMOs that are building those media teams, these are the things that you need to be looking for to handle that content in-house and make sure that it turns into profit. So good. Okay. Oh man. Okay. We said that 3:30 we're gonna end. You have your hard stop in a few minutes. I have one last question that I really, really want to ask.
All right, let's wrap it up right now, guys.
And it can be punchy to the point, right? And we talked a little bit on the growth side of it, but what are how do I acquire new readers, right? Like obviously, like specifically, how do I actually go out? So I'll share an example. For example, as we were thinking about the soccer thing, we did a campaign before Content's Profit was the thing, before Content Momentum was a service. When we used to help local businesses, we went out to this wellness company, and they had different businesses around them that complemented them. And we ran a campaign for about a week. All we did was a giveaway towards like just driving a ton of traffic from this other list into that one email. I think we gathered 2,000 emails in 2 emails, which was crazy because the people first, the medium wasn't like popular. They weren't emailing a lot of people. So the new aspect for the member was amazing. So they're like, oh my God, something new. Also, the price was valued. I think it was like $6,000 worth of it in like one price. So all these people came in, and then immediately we presented that with an offer to go to a demo in the studio. So they booked 300 sessions out of that 1 week campaign, right? So to me, like that frame was so good. And people are like, when we share, they're like, what? That's crazy, right? Because on the online now, people are a little bit more educated, different things. This was brick and mortar, and it was really effective. So like that, where are some like 1 or 2 things that people can do to acquire those new readers into the newsletters?
Great question. Well, okay. I gotta first acknowledge that between the two of us and people listening, you can take this straight to the bank. Like, you got to listen to these guys when it comes to how to acquire readers more than me. But let me give you some high level stuff, because I mean, for the most part, this is your area of expertise, but I'll show you what I've learned just from a couple of different newsletters. And I can tell you some of the more creative methods that I've seen. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that there's like 3 levers that newsletters use: time, money, and growth. Or sorry, time, money, audience. Now, each one of those, there's lots of different tactics, but each one kind of, in my opinion, boils down to a single idea. And if you know these single ideas, you'll at least be equipped to determine whether or not your marketing is working. So for time-based strategies are about one thing, and that is getting other people to tell your story. A lot of people think, and you guys probably see this all the time, like, hey, if I create content and just put it out there, it's going to grow my audience. And you're like, no, unfortunately, that's not the case. You can't just build it and they'll come. That's not how this game works.
It's not Fields of Dream.
Exactly. Time is all about getting other people to tell your story. And that's like, that's if you want to talk about like PR strategy, that's another media company telling your story. If you want to talk about SEO, that's Google talking about you when people search for certain topics, right? Yeah. So it's all about figuring out how to get other people to tell your story. Even social media only matters once people start commenting, resharing what it is you post. Just like the fact that they like it doesn't mean anything, right? So that's what time-based strategies are all about. And the story that I love to talk about that reminds me of this is Paul Revere. Is it Paul Revere? Oh my God. Yeah. Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Yeah. He's like a famous American sort of folk tale of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And he, for people listening to this who might be outside of the US, his story is back during when the revolution was first starting. Paul Revere jumped on a horse and he rode, through colonial America, warning people that the British are coming. And he's famous for it. Now, what most people don't know is that there was 5 other people who did the exact same thing that night. And a lot of them rode a lot further than he did. Like Paul Revere rode something like 13 miles. There's a guy, Israel Bissell, who rode like 300 miles over the course of several days, right? But you've never heard his name. Yeah. And the reason you've heard of Paul Revere is because like 100 years later, a poet named Longfellow wrote the story of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Somebody else told his story, and that's why you know him. It's not because he was the best. It's not because he did the most work. You need to get somebody else to tell your story if you want like content to work for you. Then there's paid and audience. Real quickly, paid is all about your cost per acquisition, right? And this is one of the reasons that we recommend people don't start paid advertising until they're deep enough into the project to understand what the lifetime value of their customers are. So if you're just starting a newsletter from scratch, you're not going to know it. If you have a bunch of money on hand, and like I know some people who don't care so much, like they'll throw $10,000 out as a test project just to see if anybody clicks on these ads.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of resource, fine. But if your ad budget needs to work, don't start with paid ads.
Yeah, I'm gonna say if you have that kind of resource, just hit us up, and then we can create content for you guys.
100%.
So with paid, it's all about customer lifetime value and your cost per acquisition. If you can acquire people via paid channels for less than your lifetime value, you're making money. And if you can acquire them at less than the target acquisition price, you throw money at that all day, right? That's the whole story behind paid content. And like you said, that could be a whole show in and of itself.
Yeah.
Last, you have audience-based. Audience-based, like the biggest thing for this is like referral engines, right? What people talk about in Morning Brew or in the Hustle. Sparkloop is a tool that's often used for this. Also, like Beehive comes with referral engines built into it. So there's a lot of different platforms that can give you referral capabilities. The way that I typically say this, and some people disagree with this wording, but I say referral engines, like referral programs, are a game. And what I mean by game is there's this whole study of game theory, which is like, how do you incentivize people to act in certain ways, or how do people act in situations when certain incentives are presented? Where people get referrals wrong a lot is that they expect that, if they do it right, everybody's going to refer somebody. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I've interviewed Louis Nichols, who runs Sparkloop, about this. And he says, I don't want to misquote the stats because I don't have them in front of me, but it's the vast, vast minority of your audience, somewhere between like 1 and 5% overall is going to use the referral platform. What you really want with that is you want two things. You want to get as many people as possible to make one referral, and then you want to set up your incentives in such a way that hopefully the whales in your audience who can make like hundreds or even thousands of referrals are incentivized to do that. And so again, it's something that we could go much deeper on in like a future episode if you ever want to. I'm happy to come back. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, so yes. So here's the deal. Invitation. Ethan, you and me are going to coordinate to continue the conversation because I think we got to like the third part of your thread, and there's so much more as I scroll down. And if you're game, we'll continue to do this. So for those listening, this is the end of probably part 3, and then we're gonna go into part 4 and 5 to continue this convo. But I know that you have to go. You have your commitment. We have our commitment as well.
Yeah. But sorry, well, we interrupted you right here at the end. You can finish your idea if you want to.
If you want
no, I think that's it. So those 3 big ideas are just, the growth boils down to using which lever you have the most access to, and making sure you understand the game that you're playing. And then, like I said, if you need growth, talk to these guys because they're the pros. The last thing I'll just say is, for people who like are looking for more of this, we're about to put out a guide that's related to this. I think we mentioned it at the top of the show. It's going to be free. Just go to trends.co and search for it. It should pop right up. You can actually, we'll commit to putting it up at trends.co/guide. If you go there, check it out. You can get on the waiting list for it, and we'll send it to you when it's ready. It's almost done.
I know,
dude. I'm pretty sure because you mentioned that you guys started working on this before pre-acquisition acquired by HubSpot, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I signed up for that guide pre-HubSpot acquisition.
Right on.
I'm so pumped.
I want to read this.
I know. For those listening, by the way, I try to get the guide before the show so you could get it like on the show, but it's so good that it's okay. Just go to trends.co/guide.
Yeah.
And join us in that wait list. I promise I have Ethan's phone number, so I'm gonna call him every day. Like, dude, is this ready or what?
It is right there. It's so close.
Dude, I can't wait. I know it's gonna be absolutely massive, and by massive I don't mean just long, but like quality wise. And dude, I can't wait to just dive into that. And we should have a project, one of those spaghettis that we just threw at the wall, and do it like kind of like give updates throughout the podcast as one of them.
I'm down. I have a bunch of ideas, so we can talk about this next time. But Ethan, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. Dude. So good. Time flew by. Obviously, we're passionate about this topic. You are passionate about this topic.
Yeah, this has been officially the longest conversation we've had in Content is Profit.
Yes, so let's go.
Yeah.
But 2 crowns. I'll take 2 crowns next time.
Let's go.
The pleasure's all mine, guys. This was an absolute blast. Thanks for having me on. Thank you to the listeners. And if they have other questions, feel free to round them up. I'm happy to come back on, do another round.
Yeah. Where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
I'm over on Twitter at Damn Ethan.
And I totally recommend you follow him on Twitter. Your threads are amazing. Honestly, I would love to have a conversation just on Twitter and how to like
threads,
have growth in there and like writing threads. What do you see more valuable, threads or like individual tweets? All this thing.
Bro, stop talking. He needs to go.
I'm just teasing the next conversations.
I'm completely down. I'm so down.
Awesome.
All right.
Ethan, it was a pleasure. For those listening, thank you so much for tuning to the Content is Profit podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite platforms and on social media at BIZBROS Co.
That is right. And if Ethan here help you move one step closer towards your goal and building an awesome newsletter, please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys. All right, Ethan, we're still live. The last thing that we got to do is a selfie time.
Yeah.
Selfie. And this is gonna be for history books because of obviously you and the mustache. So I don't know, FONZI. Sweet.
Yeah, I lost the bet. I have to paint my hair yellow, dye my hair yellow.